The rain poured over New York City, blurring the faces of strangers rushing by, but Emma's heart nearly stopped when she caught sight of her ex-husband across the street. The years of pain and bitterness came flooding back in an instant. She knew he would come toward her if he recognized her, and the thought of facing him again made her chest tighten with dread. Her feet felt glued to the pavement, but instinct took over. Just a few steps away stood a tall stranger, his dark coat damp with rain, waiting quietly as if untouched by the chaos around him. Without thinking, Emma ran to him, clutching at his arms, her voice barely above a whisper as she begged, "Just play along." The man didn't flinch. Instead, he enveloped her gently, resting one hand protectively on her back, holding her as if he had known her forever. His presence was steady, calm, and for a fleeting moment, Emma felt safe, hidden in the warmth of his embrace. Across the street, her ex-husband slowed his pace, glaring for a moment before moving on, uninterested now that she appeared to be with someone else. Emma's knees nearly buckled with relief. She pulled away quickly, her cheeks flushed, embarrassed by her impulsive act. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, brushing back wet strands of hair. "I didn't know what else to do." The stranger's eyes softened, his smile warm and understanding. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "we all need someone to hold us up." His words lingered with her, wrapping around her heart like a second embrace. For the first time in a long time, Emma realized that maybe, just maybe, life had just placed the right stranger in her path at exactly the right moment. The stranger stiffened for only a heartbeat, caught off guard by the sudden embrace, but then his arms moved with quiet assurance, drawing Emma closer as if it were the most natural thing in the world. His coat smelled faintly of rain and cedar, and the warmth of his body cut through her trembling. For a moment, time slowed, the roar of traffic and the splash of puddles seemed to fade away. He bent his head slightly, his voice low and steady, carrying a calm she hadn't felt in years. "Don't worry," he whispered, "you're safe with me." Emma clung to the words, her breath uneven, her heart pounding so loud she was certain he could feel it. Across the street, her ex-husband's gaze landed on them. His eyes narrowed, sharp and accusing, but his steps never faltered. He scowled, turned away, and vanished into the blur of rain and umbrellas. Relief surged through Emma like a wave breaking free from a dam. She let out a shaky exhale, her shoulders sagging as if an enormous weight had slipped off her back. For months she had lived in the shadow of fear, fear of being confronted, of being judged, of being reminded of the wounds she worked so hard to heal. And yet, in the arms of a stranger, all of that melted. He had shielded her without hesitation, offering safety she didn't think she'd ever find again. She lifted her gaze to him, her lips parting to speak, but the words caught in her throat. All she could manage was a small, trembling smile, silently thanking the man who, in a single moment, had made her feel something she thought she had lost forever, protected. Emma stepped back quickly, her cheeks flushed with heat despite the chill of the rain. Her hands fumbled with the strap of her bag, her words tumbling out in a rush. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have done that. I saw my ex-husband, and I panicked. I didn't know what else to do." She braced herself for irritation or worse, for the stranger to think she was unstable or reckless. But instead of judgment, his lips curved into a gentle smile, his eyes kind and unshaken. "Hey," he said softly, "don't apologize. Sometimes we all need someone to lean on. I'm just glad I was here when you needed it." His voice carried no trace of pity, only warmth, like a hand extended to someone stumbling. Emma blinked at him, surprised by his grace. She expected awkwardness, maybe even annoyance, but what she found was understanding, quiet and unwavering. They began to walk side by side, umbrellas bobbing around them as the city pulsed with its usual rhythm. Their conversation started hesitantly, but soon laughter broke through, easy and unforced, as though they weren't strangers at all but two people rediscovering something familiar. Emma found herself studying him in the glances she dared to steal, his calm way of listening, the humility in his words, the way he never tried to impress or fill the silence with noise. He carried himself with a grounded ease that felt rare in a world obsessed with appearances. She didn't know his name yet. She didn't know his story. And she certainly didn't know the truth. That beneath his quiet presence stood a man whose wealth and influence stretched far beyond anything she could imagine. All she knew was that, for the first time in years, she felt seen without judgment. A few days later, Emma's world tilted on its axis. She was scrolling through an article on her phone while sipping coffee at a small corner cafe when her breath caught. The headline read, "Daniel Hayes donates millions to fund shelters across the city." Staring back at her from the photo was the very man whose arms she had thrown herself into on that rainy afternoon. Her heart skipped. Daniel Hayes. A billionaire. A philanthropist. A man everyone seemed to know, except her. When they met again, Emma could hardly contain her shock. Her words came out sharp, fueled by disbelief. "Why didn't you say anything? You let me ramble on like you were just some stranger on the street." Her voice cracked, betraying both embarrassment and confusion. Daniel didn't flinch. His gaze stayed steady, the same calmness she remembered from that first embrace. "Because that's exactly what I wanted to be to you," he said softly. "Just a person. Not a headline. Not a bank account. I wanted you to see me for who I am, not what I have." The air between them felt heavy, yet in that weight was something freeing. Emma's anger melted into silence, her heart trembling at the sincerity in his eyes. She thought back to the rain-soaked day, the way he had shielded her, the way he had listened without judgment. None of that had been about power or prestige. It was just kindness, unadorned and real. And in that moment, Emma understood, what mattered most wasn't the billions attached to his name, but the humanity in his heart. Weeks slipped by, each one softening the edges of Emma's guarded heart. Daniel never tried to impress her with wealth or lavish gestures. Instead, he brought something far more rare: time. He showed up with patience in his voice, laughter that lit up quiet dinners, and a steadiness that made her feel like the ground beneath her feet was finally solid again. The man who could have offered her the world chose instead to offer presence, and that meant more than anything money could buy. One evening, as the city skyline burned gold beneath a fading sun, they stood side by side on a rooftop garden, the hum of New York below them. Emma's eyes lingered on the horizon before shifting to Daniel, her heart swelling with a truth she could no longer hold back. Her voice came out in a whisper, trembling yet certain. "I thought hugging you that day was just to hide from my past, but maybe it was to find my future." Daniel's expression softened, his hand finding hers with a tenderness that spoke louder than words. "Sometimes," he murmured, "the universe gives us a second chance when we least expect it." Emma's eyes glistened as she leaned into him, her fears dissolving into the quiet strength of his embrace. In his arms, she no longer felt like a woman running from her past, but one finally stepping into a tomorrow filled with possibility. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, their silhouettes melted into each other, a picture of healing, of hope, of how compassion from a stranger could transform into love that would change everything. Emma's journey began with fear and desperation, but what unfolded was a story of serendipity, healing, and rediscovery. A single, impulsive act, hugging a stranger to avoid her past, became the moment that shifted her future forever. What she thought was a clumsy attempt to hide instead revealed the quiet truth that kindness often arrives when we least expect it. Daniel's compassion showed her that love isn't about grand gestures or wealth, but about being present, patient, and genuine. In finding each other, Emma learned that sometimes the universe orchestrates the most extraordinary encounters out of ordinary moments. What began as an escape from pain became the beginning of hope. Their story reminds us all that love can be found in the unlikeliest of places, that trust can be rebuilt after it's been broken, and that healing often starts with a single act of kindness. In the end, Emma and Daniel's embrace was not just about two people holding each other, it was about holding on to second chances, to faith in humanity, and to the belief that even strangers can become everything.